The sound of papers hitting the kitchen table echoed through our house like a gunshot. I looked up from my morning coffee to see Nathan standing there with a smug smile plastered across his face. The same face I had kissed goodbye just yesterday morning, not knowing it would be for the last time as his wife. "Zara, we need to talk," he said, straightening his tie like he was about to give a business presentation. His voice carried that cold, professional tone he used when he thought he had the upper hand. I set down my mug carefully, my dark hands steady despite the storm brewing inside me. 3 months of knowing, 3 months of planning, 3 months of watching him lie to my face every single day. And now here he was, thinking he could blindside me. "Divorce papers," he announced, pushing the stack toward me like he was serving me a menu at a restaurant. "I've already signed them. My lawyer says this is the cleanest way to handle things." The papers sat between us like a white flag of surrender, but Nathan had no idea who was really surrendering. I glanced at the documents without touching them, seeing his signature bold and confident at the bottom. He had dotted every I and crossed every T, probably practiced this moment in his head dozens of times. "You'll get half the savings account and can keep your car," he continued, pacing now like he was giving a speech he had rehearsed. "I'll take over the mortgage payments until the house sells, then we split whatever's left after fees." I nodded slowly, letting him think I was processing his generous offer. In reality, I was watching him perform this little show, knowing everything I knew about where our money had really gone. The hotel receipts hidden in his gym bag. The jewelry charges on our credit card that never made it to me. The cash withdrawals he claimed were for lunch but were really funding his double life. Nathan stopped pacing and looked at me expectantly. "Zara, did you hear what I said? This is happening whether you fight it or not. Brittany and I have been planning this for months." "Brittany." He actually said her name out loud in our kitchen. The woman from his office who had been calling our house and hanging up. The one who thought she was so clever sending him emails about their weekend trips while I did his laundry. I stood up slowly, my 5'6" frame feeling taller than it ever had before. Nathan's confident expression flickered for just a second when he saw something in my eyes that he didn't recognize. Or maybe he did recognize it and that's what made him nervous. "Months, you said?" I asked, walking to the cabinet where I kept my important papers. "That's interesting timing. Zara, just sign the papers. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I pulled out a thick manila folder that had been sitting there for weeks, waiting for this exact moment. Nathan's eyes followed my movements as I placed it on the table next to his divorce papers. My folder was 3 times thicker than his. "What's that?" he asked, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. I opened the folder slowly like I was revealing a magic trick. The first page was a photograph of Nathan and Brittany kissing outside the downtown hotel. Nathan's face went completely white. "You said months," I repeated, flipping to the next page. Bank statements showing his cash withdrawals. "I've been documenting months too." Nathan reached for the folder but I pulled it back. "Don't touch what you can't afford to see." "How did you get these photos? These bank records? These copies of your emails that you thought you deleted?" I sat back down, keeping the folder open so he could see page after page of evidence. "I hired someone much better than your lawyer, Nathan." His hands started shaking. The man who had walked into this kitchen 10 minutes ago ready to dismiss me like a business meeting was now staring at documentation of his entire affair. Every lie, every stolen moment, every dollar he had taken from our joint account to fund his betrayal. "Zara, we can work this out. We don't need to involve Mr. Rodriguez?" I interrupted. "My lawyer? Oh, we're way past that. He's already filed our counter petition." Nathan collapsed into the chair across from me. "What do you want?" I closed the folder and looked at the man I had been married to for 8 years. The man who had promised to love and protect me. The man who had been planning to leave me with half a savings account while he started a new life with money he had stolen from our marriage. "I want you to pack your things and be out by tonight," I said calmly. "I want you to call your boss and explain why there are discrepancies in the company accounts before I do it for you. And I want you to understand that this conversation is the last time you get to tell me what's going to happen in my life." Nathan's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The papers he had been so proud to serve me suddenly looked like jokes compared to the evidence I had been gathering. His neat little plan was crumbling before his eyes, and he was finally realizing that I wasn't the woman he could push around anymore. I stood up and walked toward the door, leaving both sets of papers on the table. "You have 6 hours before I call Mr. Rodriguez and tell him to proceed with filing criminal charges. Choose wisely." The last thing I heard as I left the kitchen was Nathan's shaky voice calling my name, but I didn't turn around. That chapter of my life was over, and I was the one who got to write the ending. 3 months earlier, I had been living in what I thought was happiness. Nathan would leave for work each morning with a kiss on my cheek, and I would spend my days managing our home and working part-time at the local art gallery. Our life looked perfect from the outside, and I believed it was perfect on the inside too. The morning that changed everything started like any other Thursday. Nathan rushed out for an early meeting, leaving his personal phone charging on the kitchen counter. He always carried 2 phones, one for work, one personal, but he never forgot the personal one. I was loading the dishwasher when it started buzzing with text messages. The screen lit up again and again, and I could see the name Britt appearing with each notification. At first, I assumed it was his college friend Brian, who sometimes went by Britt as a nickname. But curiosity got the better of me. The messages were still showing on the lock screen when I picked up the phone. Can't wait for tonight, baby. Room 412 like always. Love you. My hands started trembling. I knew Nathan's passcode. We had always been open about our phones, but I had never felt the need to check his messages before. My fingers moved automatically, entering the 4 digits of our anniversary date. The phone unlocked and my world fell apart. Months of messages filled the screen. Photos that made my stomach turn. Plans for trips I thought Nathan was taking for work. Intimate conversations that should have been between us. And worst of all, discussions about their future together and how they were waiting for the right time to make things official. I sat on our kitchen floor, reading message after message, watching my marriage dissolve in real time. Brittany from his office wasn't just a colleague. She was the woman my husband told he loved every single day while telling me the same thing every night. The messages went back 8 months. 8 months of lies, 8 months of stolen moments, 8 months of my husband living a completely different life that I knew nothing about. They had inside jokes, pet names for each other, and a level of intimacy that Nathan and I hadn't shared in over a year. I scrolled through their photo gallery with tears streaming down my face. Pictures of them at restaurants I recognized, hotels in our city, even the park where Nathan and I used to walk together. She was beautiful in a way that made me question everything about myself. Tall, thin, blonde hair that always looked perfect even in their casual photos. But the worst part wasn't seeing them together. The worst part was reading Nathan's words about me. She's getting suspicious, he had written just 2 weeks ago. We need to be more careful. Don't worry, baby, Brittany had responded. She's too trusting to figure it out. Besides, you said she's not exactly the investigating type. They had laughed about how naive I was. How easy it was to fool me. How I believed every business trip, every late meeting, every excuse Nathan fed me. I wasn't the investigating type, but they were about to learn that I could become one real quick. I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every plan they had made. My phone's memory filled up with evidence of my husband's betrayal, but I kept going until I had documented everything I could find. When Nathan came home that evening, I was sitting at our dinner table with a smile on my face and his favorite meal warming in the oven. He kissed my forehead and asked about my day like he had every day for 8 years. I told him it was wonderful and asked about his meeting. Boring conference room stuff, he said, loosening his tie. Nothing exciting. I nodded and served him dinner, watching him eat the food I had prepared while my heart broke over and over again. He told me about his coworkers, complained about his boss, and mentioned how tired he was from the long day. Not once did he seem guilty or uncomfortable. That night, as Nathan slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and realized that the man I had been sharing a bed with was a complete stranger. The Nathan I thought I knew would never have been capable of this level of deception. This Nathan was someone who could look me in the eyes and lie without even blinking. I got up quietly and went to my laptop in the living room. If Nathan thought I wasn't the investigating type, he was about to be proven very wrong. I started researching divorce lawyers, private investigators, and anything else I would need to protect myself from the man who was supposed to protect me. By morning I had a plan. I would document everything, gather all the evidence I could find, and make sure that when this marriage ended, it would end on my terms, not his. Nathan wanted to play games with my life and my heart, but he had picked the wrong woman to underestimate. I made him breakfast the next morning and kissed him goodbye just like always. But as I watched him drive away, I wasn't the same trusting wife he had left behind. I was a woman who had learned that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And I was a woman who was going to make sure that hurt never happened to me again. The business card read Rodriguez Investigative Services, in simple black letters. I had found Mr. Rodriguez through an online search for best private investigators in the city, and his reviews spoke of discretion, thoroughness, and results. Exactly what I needed. His office was in a downtown building that looked professional but not flashy. I had told Nathan I was going shopping, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was shopping for information and I intended to buy the best quality available. Mr. Rodriguez was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put me at ease. He had clearly done this many times before because he handed me tissues before I even realized I was crying. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice calm and understanding. "Tell me what you need." I showed him the screenshots from Nathan's phone, explained about the affair, and told him I wanted to know everything. Every meeting, every hotel, every lie my husband had told me. I wanted dates, times, photographs, and financial records. "I need enough evidence to protect myself legally," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "And I need to know if there's more I don't know about." Mr. Rodriguez took notes while I talked, asking questions that I hadn't even thought of. How long had I suspected? Did Nathan have access to business accounts? Had there been any unusual financial activity? Did I have copies of our joint account statements? "Mrs. Thompson, in cases like this, there's usually more than just the affair," he said gently. "Men who are willing to deceive their wives often extend that deception to other areas of their lives." I gave him copies of everything I had found on Nathan's phone and signed his contract. The retainer fee was substantial, but it was money well spent if it meant protecting my future. Mr. Rodriguez promised to have preliminary findings within 2 weeks. While he worked, I continued my own investigation at home. I started paying attention to Nathan's habits in ways I never had before. I noticed that he showered immediately when he came home from his late meetings. I saw that he had started buying new clothes and cologne. I realized that he had been working out more and paying attention to his appearance in ways that should have made me happy but now made me suspicious. I also started going through our financial records with a fine-tooth comb. Nathan handled most of our bills and investments, always telling me not to worry about the boring money stuff. But now I was very worried about the boring money stuff. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 8 months, Nathan had withdrawn almost $15,000 in cash from our joint savings account. When I looked at the dates, they matched perfectly with the trips and hotel stays I had seen in his messages with Brittany. He had been funding his affair with our money. But it was worse than that. Nathan had also taken out a credit card in both our names without telling me. The statements came to his office, so I had never seen them, but when I called the company, they confirmed that I was equally responsible for the debt. A debt that was currently sitting at over $8,000. I felt sick. Not only was Nathan cheating on me, he was stealing from me and potentially ruining my credit. Every romantic dinner he had bought Brittany, every hotel room they had shared, every gift he had given her, it had all been paid for with money that was supposed to be securing our future together. 2 weeks later, Mr. Rodriguez called and asked me to come back to his office. The folder he placed in front of me was thick enough to choke on. "Mrs. Thompson, I have good news and bad news," he said. "The good news is that we have more than enough evidence for any divorce proceeding. The bad news is that your husband's deception goes far beyond his affair." The photographs were devastating but not surprising. Nathan and Brittany at restaurants, holding hands walking through the park, kissing in the parking lot of her apartment building. What was surprising was the timeline. The affair had been going on for 10 months, not 8 like the phone messages suggested. They had just gotten better at deleting their early conversations. But the financial investigation was the real shock. Nathan hadn't just been stealing from our personal accounts. Mr. Rodriguez had discovered that Nathan had been skimming money from his company's client accounts, using his position as an account manager to move small amounts that he thought wouldn't be noticed. "It appears he's taken approximately $30,000 from his employer over the past year," Mr. Rodriguez explained. "He's been very careful about it, but the pattern is clear when you know what to look for." I stared at the evidence spread across the desk. My husband wasn't just a cheater and a liar. He was a thief. The man I had trusted with my heart, my future, and my financial security had been systematically stealing from everyone who trusted him. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on what you want to happen," Mr. Rodriguez said. "You have enough evidence to file for divorce and demand a significant settlement. You also have evidence of embezzlement that his employer would be very interested in seeing." I thought about Nathan coming home every night, kissing my forehead, asking about my day. I thought about Brittany's messages calling me too trusting and naive. I thought about all the money that was supposed to be our emergency fund being spent on hotel rooms and jewelry for another woman. "I want copies of everything," I said. "And I want you to keep investigating until I tell you to stop." Over the next month, Mr. Rodriguez and I built a case that would have made any prosecutor proud. We had financial records, photographs, phone records, hotel receipts, and even testimony from a hotel employee who recognized Nathan and Brittany as regular guests. We also discovered that Nathan had been telling Brittany he was already separated from me and just waiting for the divorce to be finalized. She had no idea that he was still living at home, still sharing my bed, still playing the role of loving husband. By the time Nathan walked into our kitchen with his divorce papers, I had enough evidence to bury him legally, financially, and professionally. I had learned that the investigating type wasn't something you were born as, it was something you became when the people you trusted most proved they couldn't be trusted at all. And I had become very good at investigating. Mr. Rodriguez's office had become my second home over the past month. The conference room where we met was filled with boxes of evidence, financial documents, and legal paperwork that would soon change my life completely. Today he had invited his colleague, attorney Patricia Blackwell, to join our meeting. Ms. Blackwell was everything I hoped a divorce attorney would be: sharp, no nonsense, and clearly someone who didn't suffer fools. She wore a crisp navy suit and had the kind of confidence that made me feel like I was in good hands. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, reviewing the evidence files, "in my 20 years of practice, I've rarely seen a case this well documented. Your husband has made several critical errors that work very much in your favor." She spread out the financial documents across the table like she was laying out a winning poker hand. "First, he's been stealing from joint accounts to fund an affair. Second, he's incurred debt in your name without your knowledge or consent. Third, he's committed embezzlement from his employer, which is a felony." I listened as she explained each point, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that Nathan's lies were finally going to catch up with him, and sadness that my marriage had come to this. "What are my options?" I asked. "Several," Ms. Blackwell replied. "You can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. Given the evidence, you're entitled to significantly more than half of the marital assets as compensation for his theft and deception." She pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. "The house is worth approximately $400,000. Your joint savings before his withdrawals was sitting at $60,000. His 401k has about $120,000. Even after his theft, you're looking at a substantial settlement." Mr. Rodriguez leaned forward. "There's also the matter of his employment. His company has a strict policy about financial misconduct. If they discover what he's been doing, he'll be terminated immediately and likely face criminal charges." I thought about this for a moment. The vindictive part of me wanted Nathan to face every possible consequence for what he had done. But I also needed to think practically about my own future. If he gets fired and goes to jail, how does that affect my settlement? I asked. "That's the beautiful part," Ms. Blackwell said with a slight smile. "You file first before his criminal issues come to light. The court will order him to pay you a specific amount based on his current employment and assets. What happens to him after that isn't your problem." We spent the next 2 hours planning my strategy. Ms. Blackwell would file divorce papers demanding the house, 3/4 of all assets, alimony, and compensation for the money Nathan had stolen. The amount would be significant enough to ensure my financial security for years to come. "He'll never agree to those terms," I said. "He will when he sees what we have on him," Mr. Rodriguez replied. "Men like Nathan think they're smarter than everyone else right up until the moment they realize they're not." Ms. Blackwell handed me a folder containing the papers she would file on my behalf. "The beauty of this approach is that Nathan will be so focused on trying to minimize his legal exposure that he'll agree to almost anything to keep his employer and the authorities from finding out about his embezzlement." I looked at the proposed settlement terms. Nathan would be left with his car, his clothes, and whatever money he could earn going forward. Everything else would become mine. It was more than fair, it was justice. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Ms. Blackwell said. "Nathan will likely try to manipulate you emotionally. He'll apologize, promise to change, maybe even claim that he was planning to leave Brittany anyway. You need to be prepared for that." I thought about the Nathan I had fallen in love with versus the Nathan who had been stealing from me for months. "I don't think that's going to be a problem." "Good," she said. "Because men who are capable of this level of deception are also capable of very convincing performances when they're desperate." We scheduled the filing for the following week. Ms. Blackwell would serve Nathan with papers at his office, ensuring that his colleagues would witness him receiving divorce documents. It was a small humiliation, but after months of him humiliating me without my knowledge, it felt appropriate. Mr. Rodriguez would continue monitoring Nathan's activities to ensure he didn't try to hide assets or destroy evidence. We had copies of everything, but desperate people sometimes did stupid things that only made their situations worse. As I drove home that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: Control. For the first time since discovering Nathan's affair, I wasn't reacting to his choices. I was making my own choices, and those choices were going to protect my future and ensure that Nathan faced real consequences for his actions. That evening, Nathan came home from work complaining about a difficult client and asking what was for dinner. I served him his favorite meal and listened to him talk about his day, knowing that it would be one of his last days of thinking he had fooled everyone. "You're quiet tonight," he observed. "Everything okay?" I looked across the table at the man who had stolen from me, lied to me, and planned to abandon me while keeping me completely in the dark about his intentions. "Everything's perfect," I said, and for the first time in months I meant it. Nathan smiled and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I love you, Zara." I squeezed back and smiled. "I know exactly how much you love me, Nathan. Down to the dollar." He laughed, not understanding what I meant, and went back to eating his dinner. In a few days he would understand perfectly. And by then, it would be far too late for him to do anything about it. Nathan's divorce papers had been sitting on our kitchen table for exactly 37 minutes. I had timed it. During those 37 minutes, I had watched my husband of 8 years transform from confident betrayer to terrified defendant. The folder I had placed next to his papers contained copies of everything Mr. Rodriguez and Ms. Blackwell had helped me gather. But Nathan didn't know that these were copies. For all he knew, destroying this folder would destroy the evidence of his crimes. "Zara, let's be reasonable about this," Nathan said, his voice shaking as he tried to flip through my documentation. "We can work something out without involving lawyers and investigators." I sat back down at the table and watched him panic. 3 months ago, this man had looked me in the eye and lied about working late while he was actually in a hotel room with Brittany. Now he couldn't even look at me without his hands trembling. "You're right," I said calmly. "We should be reasonable. Let's start with the $30,000 you've stolen from your company." Nathan's face went white. "How did you find out about the client account transfers?" "The same way I found out about everything else. By hiring people who are better at investigating than you are at covering your tracks." I pulled out a specific document and placed it in front of him. Bank records showing money moving from his company's client accounts into a personal account he had opened without telling me. An account that had funded most of his affair activities. "This is embezzlement, Nathan. It's a felony. Your company has zero-tolerance policies for this kind of thing, and the state attorney's office loves prosecuting white-collar crime." Nathan pushed the paper away like it was on fire. "You can't prove anything. Those transfers could be explained." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Nathan, I have copies of your text messages where you literally tell Brittany that you borrowed money from work to pay for your trip to Charleston. You document your own crimes." The trip to Charleston. Nathan had told me it was a business conference. He had even shown me fake conference materials and complained about having to travel for work. In reality, he had taken Brittany on a romantic weekend getaway funded by money he had stolen from his employer. "What do you want?" Nathan asked, finally understanding that he was completely trapped. I pulled out the settlement terms that Ms. Blackwell had prepared. "I want what's fair. I want the house, I want compensation for what you've stolen from our accounts, and I want alimony." Nathan's eyes bulged as he read the numbers. "This is everything. You're leaving me with nothing." "I'm leaving you with more than you deserve," I replied. "I'm not sending copies of these financial documents to your boss. I'm not filing criminal charges. I'm giving you the chance to sign these papers and walk away with your freedom." I let that sink in for a moment. Nathan was so focused on losing money that he hadn't fully grasped that he could lose much more than money. "If you don't sign," I continued, "Mr. Rodriguez has instructions to deliver copies of everything to your company's HR department and the district attorney's office. Ms. Blackwell will file for divorce anyway, but instead of getting a clean settlement, you'll be fighting criminal charges while unemployed." Nathan was reading the settlement terms over and over, like he thought the numbers might change if he stared at them long enough. "This can't be legal. You can't force me to agree to this." "You're absolutely right," I said. "I can't force you to agree to anything. You can refuse to sign, hire your own lawyer, and fight this in court. Of course, that means all this evidence becomes public record. Your affair, your theft, your lies, everything gets presented in front of a judge." I paused to let him imagine how that would go. "I wonder what Brittany will think when she finds out you've been stealing money to fund your relationship. I wonder what your parents will think. I wonder what your co-workers will think when they see the photos of you two together." Nathan's breathing was getting shallow. The man who had been so confident this morning when he thought he was blindsiding me was now having what looked like a panic attack. "Brittany doesn't know about the money," he whispered. No, she doesn't. But she will. Everyone will. Unless you sign those papers and agree to quietly disappear from my life. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where Nathan and I had planned to grow old together. You have until midnight to decide. Either you sign these papers and this stays between us, or you don't sign and this becomes everyone's business. What about Brittany? Nathan asked. What about her? Are you going to tell her? About the money? I turned back to look at him. Nathan, I don't care about Brittany. I don't care about your relationship with her or what happens to either of you. My only concern is making sure I'm protected from the financial damage you've caused. Nathan put his head in his hands. Zara, I never meant for it to happen like this. Brittany and we just connected and I thought maybe if I could just figure out a way to transition. Stop, I said firmly. I don't want to hear about your feelings or your transition plan or how you never meant to hurt me. You did hurt me. You stole from me. You lied to me every single day for 10 months. I walked back to the table and gathered up my evidence folder. You have until midnight. If these papers aren't signed and on this table when I wake up tomorrow morning, Mr. Rodriguez makes his phone calls. As I headed toward the door, Nathan called after me. Where are you going? Out, I said without turning around. I have a life to rebuild and it starts tonight. I left Nathan sitting in our kitchen with his divorce papers and my settlement terms, finally understanding that the naive wife he thought he could manipulate had been several steps ahead of him the entire time. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Strong, smart, and completely in control of my own destiny. I woke up the next morning to find Nathan's signed settlement agreement on the kitchen table, along with a note that simply said, I'm sorry. His wedding ring sat next to the papers and his car was gone from the driveway. Nathan had chosen the easy way out, which didn't surprise me. Men who steal and cheat aren't usually the type to face consequences head-on. But his signature on those papers meant that the house, our savings, and my financial future were secure. I made my coffee and sat at the table, reading through the signed agreement while the morning sun streamed through the windows. It felt strange to be happy in the same kitchen where my marriage had officially ended, but I was undeniably, completely happy. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. The caller ID showed Nathan's office number. Mrs. Thompson? This is Rebecca, Mr. Thompson's assistant. Is Nathan feeling better today? He didn't come in yesterday afternoon and he's not answering his phone this morning. I almost laughed. Nathan had probably been too busy panicking and packing to remember to call in sick to work. I'm sorry, Rebecca, but Nathan and I are getting divorced. You'll need to contact him directly about his work schedule. There was a long pause. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Thompson. I had no idea. Neither did I until recently. Have a good day, Rebecca. I hung up and immediately called Ms. Blackwell to let her know that Nathan had signed the papers. She sounded pleased but not surprised. Men like Nathan usually take the path of least resistance, she said. He's probably hoping this all goes away quietly and he can start over somewhere else. What happens now? Now we file with the court and wait for your decree to be finalized. Given that he's agreed to everything, it should be a simple process. You should be officially divorced within 60 days. 60 days to be free. After 10 months of lies and 8 years of marriage, 60 days seemed like nothing. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Is this Zara Thompson? The voice was female, younger than mine, and nervous. Yes, who is this? This is Brittany. Brittany Chin. I think we need to talk. I sat down. This was a conversation I had never expected to have. I'm not sure we have anything to discuss, Brittany. Please, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. Nathan told me some things yesterday and I need to know if they're true. Part of me wanted to hang up. Brittany had been part of destroying my marriage and I owed her nothing. But curiosity got the better of me. What did Nathan tell you? He said he'd been stealing money from work. He said you found out about everything and that you're divorcing him. He said he might go to jail. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Nathan told you the truth. For once. I didn't know, Brittany said, her voice breaking. About the money, I mean. He told me he was separated from you and just waiting for the divorce to be final. He said he had savings from before his marriage. Of course he did. Nathan had created a completely different story for Brittany, just like he had created a completely different story for me. We had both been living with men who didn't exist. Brittany, I don't know what you want me to say. Nathan lied to both of us. I want to apologize, she said. I would never have gotten involved with a married man if I had known the truth. And I definitely wouldn't have let him spend stolen money on me. I found myself believing her. There was something genuine in her voice that Nathan had never possessed. Apology accepted. What's going to happen to him? I don't know, I said honestly. He signed divorce papers that keep this between us, but that doesn't protect him if his company figures out what he's been doing on their own. They already have, Brittany said quietly. Nathan got fired this morning. Security escorted him out of the building. HR called me in for questioning because people knew we were dating. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sympathy. Nathan was finally facing consequences, but Brittany was facing them too, even though she hadn't known about the theft. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said and meant it. I broke up with him, Brittany said. Yesterday after he told me everything. I can't be with someone who lies that easily. I keep thinking about all the times he looked me in the eye and told me he was separated, and I wonder what else he lied about. Probably everything, I said. That's what liars do. We talked for a few more minutes. Brittany told me that Nathan had been texting and calling her non-stop since his firing, begging her to take him back and promising that they could work through his legal troubles together. She had blocked his number. He seems to think that if we stay together, somehow this will all work out, she said. Like love conquers all, even embezzlement. Nathan has never been good at accepting responsibility for his actions, I replied. He probably genuinely believes that everything that's happened is someone else's fault. After we hung up, I realized that Brittany and I had both been victims of Nathan's deception. She had thought she was dating a separated man who was financially stable. I had thought I was married to a faithful man who was financially responsible. We had both been wrong. That evening, Nathan called my phone from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won again. Zara, please, we need to talk, he said immediately. This has all gotten out of hand. Nathan, we have nothing to talk about. You signed the papers. We're done. My life is falling apart. I lost my job, Brittany won't return my calls, and I'm probably going to face criminal charges. You got what you wanted. I got what I deserved, I corrected. You created the situation, Nathan. Every single part of it. Can't we work something out? Maybe I could move back in temporarily while I figure things out. I laughed. Actually laughed. Nathan, are you seriously asking me to help you after you stole my money to fund an affair? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to pay back the company money. I was going to tell you about Brittany when the time was right. When was the right time going to be, Nathan? After you had stolen more money? After you had married Brittany? When exactly was the right time to tell me that my husband was a thief and a liar? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he finally said. I just know that I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. I hung up and blocked his number. Nathan's life was crumbling, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I had spent months cleaning up the mess he had made of my life. He could clean up his own mess. For the first time in almost a year, I was the only person I had to worry about. And that felt absolutely liberating. 2 months later, I walked out of the courthouse with my divorce decree in hand and felt like I could breathe for the first time in a year. The judge had approved our settlement without question, and Nathan didn't even show up to the hearing. Ms. Blackwell said it was typical for the guilty party to avoid facing the music in person. The house was officially mine now, along with everything we had discussed in our settlement. Nathan's portion of our joint assets had been reduced to almost nothing after compensating me for his theft, which seemed perfectly fair given the circumstances. I drove home to my home now and walked through each room like I was seeing it for the first time. Nathan's presence had been erased completely. He had taken his clothes and personal items weeks ago, but I had spent the last month redecorating and making the space truly mine. The living room that used to be decorated in colors Nathan preferred was now painted in the soft blues and greens that made me happy. The kitchen where he had served me divorce papers was now bright and welcoming, with plants on every windowsill and artwork from local artists covering the walls. I had quit my part-time job at the gallery and used part of my settlement money to start my own interior design business. The extra bedroom that Nathan had used as an office was now my studio, filled with fabric samples, paint swatches, and design plans for my first few clients. Starting my own business had been terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I had always been passionate about design, but Nathan had discouraged me from pursuing it seriously, saying it was more of a hobby than a real career. Turns out that being free from Nathan's opinions about my life was incredibly motivating. My first client had been Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who wanted to redecorate her living room after her husband passed away. She had seen my work at the gallery and asked if I did private consultations. That one project led to 2 more, then 5 more, and suddenly I had a business that was actually making money. The work was satisfying in a way that nothing had been for years. I was helping people create spaces that reflected who they truly were, and in the process I was discovering who I truly was too. Without Nathan's constant opinions and criticism, I found that I was braver than I had ever imagined. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Tessa, my best friend who had been my rock through the divorce process. "How does it feel to be officially free?" she asked. "Scary and wonderful," I said honestly. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, but maybe there is no other shoe." "There's no other shoe, honey. You handled everything perfectly, and now you get to build whatever life you want." Tessa had been the one person I had confided in about Nathan's affair before confronting him. She had been furious on my behalf and had supported every decision I made, from hiring investigators to demanding a fair settlement. Having her in my corner had made everything easier. "I have news," I said. "Mrs. Rodriguez called today. She wants me to redesign her entire house. It's my biggest project yet." "That's amazing. See, I told you this business would take off." "I'm scared I'm not ready for something that big," I admitted. "Zara, you handled 10 months of your husband's lies while secretly building a case against him that would make FBI agents proud. You can handle redecorating a house." She was right. If I could survive discovering Nathan's affair, documenting his crimes, and rebuilding my life from scratch, I could definitely handle interior design challenges. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine and watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. For the first time in months, my mind wasn't racing with legal strategies or evidence documentation or settlement negotiations. I was just sitting quietly, enjoying the peace of my own space. My neighbor, Mrs. Foster, waved from her garden. "Zara, dear, how are you settling in?" Settling in was her polite way of asking how I was handling being alone in the house. The neighbors had all noticed when Nathan moved out, but Mrs. Foster was the only one who had asked directly if I was okay. "I'm doing wonderful, Mrs. Foster. Better than I have in a long time." "Good for you, dear. Sometimes we need to prune the dead branches to help the tree grow stronger." I smiled at her gardening metaphor. Nathan had definitely been a dead branch in my life, and pruning him had allowed me to grow in ways I never expected. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I found myself standing in the bathroom that Nathan and I used to share. His toothbrush was gone, his cologne was gone, his hair products were gone. The counter space that used to be cluttered with his things was now clean and organized with only my belongings. 6 months ago, the sight of that empty counter space would have made me cry. Tonight, it made me smile. I had space to spread out, space to put my things exactly where I wanted them, space to live without constantly accommodating someone else's preferences. I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked for the first time in months. The stress lines around my eyes were fading. My smile looked genuine again. I looked like someone who was building a life she actually wanted to live. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a second, my heart raced, thinking it might be Nathan trying to contact me from yet another phone. But the message made me smile instead. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Julian from the coffee shop downtown. You left your business card when you were working on designs yesterday. I own a photography studio and I'm looking to redesign the space. Would you be interested in discussing a project? A new client. A new opportunity. A new chance to build something beautiful." I texted back immediately. "I'd love to discuss your project. Are you available to meet this week?" As I turned off the lights and settled into bed, I realized that freedom felt exactly like this. Like having space for new opportunities, new relationships, new versions of yourself that you never got to explore before. Nathan had thought he was ending my life when he served me those divorce papers. Instead, he had given me the greatest gift imaginable, the chance to start over and build something better than what I had lost. The coffee shop on 5th Street had become my unofficial office. I met clients there, worked on design plans, and gradually became a regular who had her own table by the window. The owner, Julian, was a photographer who had converted the upstairs into his studio space. I had noticed him before, of course. He was hard to miss, tall with kind eyes and an easy smile that made everyone feel welcome. But I was still newly divorced and not looking for anything more complicated than good coffee and reliable Wi-Fi. The morning he approached my table, I was spread out with fabric samples and paint swatches for Mrs. Rodriguez's project, completely absorbed in trying to balance her love of bold colors with her husband's preference for neutral tones. "Mrs. Thompson?" His voice was warm with just a hint of nervousness. "I'm Julian. I sent you that text about redesigning my studio?" I looked up from my color samples and felt my breath catch slightly. Up close, Julian was even more attractive than I had realized. But more than that, there was something genuine about him that reminded me how nice it was to talk to someone who wasn't hiding anything. "Please call me Zara," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I'd love to hear about your project." Julian sat down and pulled out his phone to show me photos of his studio space. "I've been in business for 5 years, but the space still looks like I moved in yesterday. I can take beautiful photographs, but apparently I can't decorate to save my life." I scrolled through his photos, both of the studio and examples of his work. His photography was stunning, mostly portraits and weddings, with an artistic eye that captured genuine emotions rather than posed perfection. "These are beautiful," I said, lingering on a photo of an elderly couple dancing at what was clearly their anniversary party. "You have a gift for capturing real moments." "Thank you. That's what I try to do, help people see the beauty in their real lives, not some perfect version they think they should have." Something about the way he said it made me look at him more carefully. Julian understood the difference between real life and performance, which was something I was still learning to appreciate after years of Nathan's deception. We spent an hour discussing his vision for the studio space. Julian wanted something that would make his clients feel comfortable and relaxed, but also professional and artistic. He had ideas but needed help bringing them together in a cohesive way. "I'd love to work on this project," I said finally. "When would you like to start?" "How about tomorrow? I could show you the space and we could grab lunch afterward to discuss ideas." I hesitated for just a moment. The professional part of the invitation was exactly what I wanted, but lunch felt like it might be something more. I wasn't sure I was ready for something more. Julian seemed to sense my hesitation. "Just as a thank you for taking on the project," he added quickly. "I know you're probably busy with other clients." "Lunch sounds great," I said, surprising myself. The next day, Julian's studio exceeded my expectations. The space had huge windows, exposed brick walls, and beautiful hardwood floors. It had incredible potential but was currently filled with mismatched furniture and equipment scattered around without any thought to flow or aesthetics. "I can see why you need help," I said, laughing as I nearly tripped over a light stand. "But this space is going to be gorgeous when we're done with it." We spent 2 hours measuring, taking photos, and discussing possibilities. Julian had excellent instincts about what would work for his business, and he listened to my suggestions without trying to take over the conversation. After months of Nathan's constant need to be the expert on everything, Julian's collaborative approach was refreshing. Lunch was at a small restaurant a few blocks away. Julian insisted on a table outside so we could continue looking at the photos and sketches we had made. What started as a business discussion slowly became something more personal. "Have you always been interested in design?" Julian asked. "Yes, but I never took it seriously until recently. My ex-husband thought it was more of a hobby than a real career." I paused, realizing I had mentioned Nathan. "Sorry, I don't usually bring up my divorce on the first meeting with clients." "Don't apologize. Divorce is part of life." "Was it recent?" 2 months ago. We were married for 8 years, but it turns out I didn't know him as well as I thought I did." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "I've never been married, but I've had relationships where I felt like I was performing a role instead of being myself. It's exhausting." That was exactly what my marriage to Nathan had been like, though I hadn't realized it until after it was over. I had been performing the role of supportive wife while Nathan performed the role of faithful husband, and neither of us had been authentic. "What kind of photography do you enjoy most?" I asked, steering the conversation back to safer ground. "Portraits, definitely. I love helping people see themselves the way their loved ones see them. Most people are so critical of themselves that they never realize how beautiful they are." The way he said it, looking directly at me, made my cheeks warm. Julian wasn't flirting exactly, but there was an undercurrent of something that made me feel attractive in a way I hadn't felt in years. We talked for 3 hours. About art, about business, about books we had read and places we wanted to travel. Julian was well-read and thoughtful, with opinions about things that mattered and the ability to listen when I shared my own thoughts. When we finally left the restaurant, Julian walked me to my car. "I had a really good time today. Beyond the business stuff, I mean." "Me too," I admitted. "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" "Not for business. Just because I'd like to spend more time with you." I looked at this kind, attractive man who was asking me on a real date, and felt a flutter of panic. It had been so long since I had dated anyone besides Nathan, and my track record with relationships was clearly questionable. "I'd like that," I said, deciding to be brave. "But I should probably mention that I'm still figuring out who I am as a single person. I don't want to mislead you about where I am emotionally." Julian smiled. "I'm not looking for someone who has everything figured out. I'm looking for someone genuine who's willing to figure things out together. That might have been the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but the simple offer to navigate life together without pretense or performance. In that case, I'd love to have dinner with you. As I drove home that afternoon, I caught myself smiling for no reason other than the memory of Julian's laugh or the way he had listened to my ideas about his studio space. For the first time since my divorce, I felt excited about the possibility of letting someone new into my life. Not because I needed someone to complete me or take care of me, but because I had finally become someone worth sharing with. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I thought Nathan was completely out of my life. My business was thriving, my relationship with Julian was growing stronger every day, and I had built a routine that made me genuinely happy for the first time in years. Then Nathan started showing up. The first time I thought it was a coincidence. I was having lunch with Julian at our favorite restaurant when I spotted Nathan sitting at the bar, nursing a beer and staring in our direction. When I pointed him out to Julian, Nathan quickly paid his tab and left. Ex-husband? Julian asked. Unfortunately. He's supposed to leave me alone according to our divorce agreement. Julian reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Do you want to leave? No, I said firmly. I'm not going to let Nathan chase me away from places I enjoy. But it wasn't a coincidence. Over the next 2 weeks, Nathan appeared everywhere I went. At the grocery store, at the coffee shop where I worked, even driving slowly past my house in the evenings. He never approached me directly, but his presence was clearly intentional. I called Ms. Blackwell to ask about my options. He's not technically violating the divorce agreement unless he contacts you directly, she explained. But this pattern of behavior could qualify for a restraining order if you want to pursue that. What would that involve? You'd need to document every incident and file with the court. The judge would review the evidence and decide whether his behavior constitutes harassment. I started keeping a detailed log of Nathan's appearances, including dates, times, and locations. Julian helped by taking photographs when Nathan showed up while we were together. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Nathan was stalking me. The situation escalated when Nathan began interfering with my business. 3 of my clients received anonymous phone calls warning them that I was unstable and going through a difficult divorce. Mrs. Rodriguez called me directly to ask if there was something she should know. Mrs. Rodriguez, I've been divorced for 6 months. My personal life is completely separate from my work, and I'm certainly not unstable. I didn't think you were, dear. The person who called sounded like a man with an agenda. I just wanted to give you a chance to address it directly. I knew it was Nathan, but proving it would be difficult. He was being careful not to leave evidence that could be traced back to him directly. The breaking point came when Julian and I were having dinner at his apartment. We were cooking together, laughing about my terrible knife skills, when someone started pounding on the front door. Julian looked through the peephole and turned back to me with concern. It's a man I don't recognize. He looks agitated. I knew without looking that it was Nathan. Don't open the door. Call the police. Nathan's voice came through the door, slurred and angry. Zara, I know you're in there. We need to talk. Go away, Nathan. I called back. You're violating our agreement by contacting me. I lost everything because of you. My job, my girlfriend, my money. The least you can do is talk to me. Julian was already on the phone with 911, giving them the address and explaining that my ex-husband was threatening me. I could hear Nathan continuing to rant outside, his voice getting louder and more incoherent. You think you're so smart with your lawyers and your investigators? But you destroyed my life. Brittany won't even talk to me anymore. So Brittany was still refusing to reconcile with him. I wasn't surprised. She had seemed genuinely horrified when she learned about Nathan's lies and theft. Apparently, she had maintained her standards even when Nathan tried to win her back. The police arrived within 10 minutes. Through the window, we watched them approach Nathan, who was still standing on Julian's porch. He was clearly drunk and became belligerent when they tried to talk to him. One of the officers came to the door after they had taken Nathan away. Ma'am, we arrested him for public intoxication and trespassing. You'll need to file a report if you want to press charges for harassment. I gave the officer my documentation of Nathan's stalking behavior over the past 2 weeks. Julian provided his photos and served as a witness to Nathan's threatening behavior. This is clearly a pattern, the officer said, reviewing my log. I'd recommend filing for a restraining order first thing Monday morning. In the meantime, he'll be in jail overnight and we'll make sure he understands that any further contact with you will result in immediate arrest. After the police left, Julian and I sat on his couch trying to process what had just happened. I was shaking, not from fear but from anger. Nathan had been out of my life for months, and I had been happily moving forward. His decision to insert himself back into my world felt like a violation of everything I had worked to build. "I'm sorry," I said to Julian. "You didn't sign up for drama with my ex-husband." Julian pulled me closer. "Zara, you have nothing to apologize for. Nathan's behavior is not your fault, and it doesn't change how I feel about you." "How do you feel about me?" I asked, suddenly needing to hear it. "I love you," Julian said simply. "I love your strength, your creativity, your kindness. I love how you rebuilt your life from nothing and turned it into something beautiful. And I love that you trusted me enough to let me be part of it." It was the first time either of us had said, "I love you," and hearing it in the aftermath of Nathan's meltdown made it even more meaningful. Julian had seen me at my most vulnerable, and his response was to love me more, not less. "I love you too," I said, and meant it completely. Monday morning, I filed for a restraining order against Nathan. The judge reviewed the evidence and granted a temporary order immediately, with a hearing scheduled for the following week to make it permanent. Nathan didn't show up to the hearing. According to Ms. Blackwell, he had been arrested again 2 days after his release for driving under the influence. His downward spiral was accelerating, but it was no longer my problem to solve. The restraining order was made permanent, legally preventing Nathan from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or business. If he violated it, he would face immediate arrest and jail time. That evening, Julian and I celebrated the restraining order by cooking dinner together and planning our first vacation as a couple. Nathan's desperate attempt to disrupt my new life had only made me more grateful for what I had built and more committed to protecting it. "Do you think he'll stay away now?" Julian asked. "I think Nathan is finally realizing that trying to destroy my life only makes his life worse," I said. "But if he doesn't realize that, the legal system will help him figure it out." For the first time in weeks, I felt completely safe and completely free. Nathan's desperation had been his final gift to me, the proof that leaving him had been the best decision I ever made. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my beautifully renovated home, watching Julian photograph my latest interior design project for my portfolio. Sunlight streamed through the windows I had enlarged during the renovation, illuminating the space that had once been the scene of Nathan's betrayal and was now the heart of my new life. My business, Zara Thompson Designs, had grown beyond my wildest expectations. Word of mouth from satisfied clients had led to a steady stream of projects, and I now had a waiting list that stretched 3 months out. Julian's studio redesign had been featured in a local magazine, which led to more commercial projects and even a few celebrity clients. "Perfect," Julian said, lowering his camera. "These photos are going to look amazing in your portfolio." I walked over to look at the images on his camera's display. The kitchen looked sophisticated and welcoming, nothing like the cold, generic space it had been when Nathan and I lived here together. Every detail reflected my personal style and vision, from the hand-painted backsplash to the custom cabinetry I had designed myself. "I can't believe this used to be my kitchen," I said, still amazed by the transformation. "It was always your kitchen," Julian replied, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "You just needed to claim it." My phone rang, interrupting our moment. The caller ID showed Ms. Blackwell's office number. "Zara, I have an update about Nathan," she said when I answered. "His embezzlement case finally went to trial last week." I had known that Nathan's former employer had eventually pressed criminal charges, but I had deliberately avoided following the case. That part of my life was over, and I saw no benefit in tracking Nathan's legal troubles. "He pled guilty to avoid jail time," Ms. Blackwell continued. "He received 5 years probation and has to pay full restitution to his former company. He also has to complete community service and attend counseling." "Good," I said simply. "I hope he gets the help he needs." And I meant it. I wasn't vindictive anymore. Nathan's actions had consequences and he was finally facing them, but I didn't take any pleasure in his suffering. I had moved so far beyond our relationship that his legal troubles felt like news about a stranger. "There's one more thing," Ms. Blackwell said. "Nathan's lawyer reached out about the restitution payments. Nathan wants to know if you would consider accepting partial payment of what he owes you as part of his court-ordered restitution." I almost laughed. Even in legal trouble, Nathan was trying to find a way to reduce his financial obligations to me. Something's never changed. "No," I said firmly. "Our divorce settlement is separate from his criminal restitution. He needs to pay his former employer what he owes them, and he needs to pay me what he owes me." I figured that would be your answer, but I had to ask. After hanging up, I told Julian about Nathan's legal resolution. He listened without comment, then kissed my forehead gently. How do you feel about it? He asked. Indifferent, I said, surprising myself with how true that was. A year ago, I would have been angry or vindicated or something. Now it just feels like information about someone I used to know. That evening, Julian and I had dinner with Tessa and her husband Marcus. They had been our double-date partners for months now, and it felt wonderful to have couple friends who knew both Julian and me as individuals rather than just as half of a relationship. So when are you two going to make it official? Tessa asked over dessert, not being subtle at all about her hopes for an engagement. Julian and I exchanged a look. We had been talking about marriage for months, but we hadn't shared our timeline with anyone else yet. Actually, Julian said, reaching into his jacket pocket, I was hoping tonight might be a good time to ask. My heart stopped as he pulled out a small velvet box. This wasn't how I had imagined a proposal would happen in a restaurant with our friends watching, but somehow it was perfect. Julian understood that I needed my support system around me for big moments. Zara, he said, taking my hand, you taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. You showed me that two people can build something beautiful together if they're honest about who they are and what they want. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring that was exactly my style. Will you marry me? Yes, I said immediately, tears streaming down my face. Yes, absolutely yes. The restaurant erupted in applause as Julian slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, and I realized he must have gotten my size from Tessa months ago. Later that night, as we lay in bed in Julian's apartment, I stared at my engagement ring in the moonlight coming through the window. Are you happy? Julian asked softly. I'm more than happy, I said. I'm grateful. A year and a half ago, I thought my life was over when Nathan served me those divorce papers. I couldn't imagine being happy again, let alone being this happy. Nathan did you a favor, Julian said. If he hadn't been stupid enough to get caught, you might have stayed in that marriage for years. He was right. If Nathan had been a better liar, I might still be living in that cold, generic house, working part-time at the gallery, never knowing that I was capable of building a business or a life that truly reflected who I was. I want to send him a thank you card, I joked. Dear Nathan, thank you for being such a terrible husband that I had no choice but to become a better person. Julian laughed. Don't give him that much credit. You became a better person because that's who you always were underneath. Nathan just held you back from showing it. 3 months later, Julian and I were married in a small ceremony in his photography studio, surrounded by the friends and family who had supported us through our individual journeys and our journey together. I wore a dress I had designed myself, and Julian's photographs from that day captured every moment of joy and celebration. As I danced with my new husband in the space where we had first gotten to know each other, I thought about the woman I had been when Nathan pushed those divorce papers across our kitchen table. She had been scared, heartbroken, and completely unprepared for the fight ahead of her. But she had fought anyway. She had hired investigators, confronted lies, demanded justice, and rebuilt her life from the ground up. She had been stronger than she knew, and everything good in my current life existed because she had refused to give up. Nathan had thought he was ending my story when he served me those papers. Instead, he had given me the chance to write a completely new story, one where I was the hero instead of the victim, where love was based on truth instead of deception, and where my happiness was something I created rather than something someone else could take away. 6 months after our wedding, Julian and I found out we were expecting our first child. As I placed my hand on my growing belly and felt the baby kick, I realized that Nathan's betrayal had led to every blessing in my current life. My business, my marriage, and now this baby. None of it would have existed if I had stayed in that safe, small life I had been living before. The woman who had sat in that kitchen 18 months ago, staring at divorce papers and feeling like her world was ending, could never have imagined the life I was living now. But she had been brave enough to fight for something better, even when she couldn't see what better might look like. And that bravery had led to everything beautiful that followed.